Hello, welcome to Practicing Life podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Pitzer, and I want to welcome Mandeep Kaur to the show. She's a natural gifted psychic medium healer, a self published author of the book Light on the Other Side, and a holistic event organizer doing such events such as Mind, Body, Soul Charity. She also teaches courses. So I am very excited to have you on the show. And did I say your name correctly?
You did, Mandeep Kaur. That's absolutely correct. And thank you for the lovely introduction.
Well, thank you for coming and thank you for being here and being willing to talk about what it's like to have a psychic gift, how people are interacting with you, and what is actually going on through this whole journey that you are on with writing your book and with now that it's published and it's released, kind of the after effect. So let's get started. Tell me, what's your story? Like, how did it come about you writing this book?
So it's been on my mind for so many years to write a book, and I just didn't know what type of book I wanted to write. Then I contacted a lady, we talked about it, and it was about my spiritual work. But then we wanted to go into the business side of it. But as I started, my whole journey, my whole story kept coming out, and that's what I ended up writing. So for me, it was a very healing, cathartic journey, and just taking the time with it, not to force anything, and just completely taking the time with it. Lots of spiritual experiences, lots of life experiences are in the book as well. So there's lots of inspiration there to be taken in lots of different forms. I've also got a special needs child, so there's lots in that book.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing is that you had a kind of an expectation of what your book was going to look like when you started it, but then you got into the process and just downloads were coming through to you and you just started pouring out what was on your soul, and it
Absolutely.
transpired to something possibly different.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of writing. Once you sit down, you do have, I mean, you have to work according to a structure, but when you actually sit down, there's so much more that kind of comes out. And especially things that you think that you've dealt with in the past, when you start writing, it starts to come out and you're actually reliving that whole process again. So for me, that was quite deep. But coming out of the other side of that, I know now if I touch on that subject, I know I've dealt with it. And through writing, that's really helped me to do that.
Yeah, I mean, writing is one of those things where at a certain point, your conscious, your analytical brain shuts off, and it's amazing what is really stored in the subconscious part of your brain. And it is very eye-opening. One of the things that I often talk about with my clients, and it's on my website, so I probably preach it, but we often deal with things analytically and logically, and we think that it is sorted out and we think that we've adjusted and we handle it, and then all of a sudden you're getting into this writing process, which is much more connecting to the soul because you're getting into your subconscious, and you like floored when you're like, I'm getting all emotional about writing this, or you feel
Yeah,
the emotions of like fear coming up, like I can't write this.
yeah.
So
This is where you've got to learn about your own self-care, knowing about your own triggers as well. And if you do have a trigger, well, how do I cope with that? So for me, it's just taking a break, taking a step back. But talking on a deeper level through writing, it's very similar to meditation, talking about the well-being side of things, and then about mental health. Meditation is very much similar in its own way, about going deep down into your subconscious mind and not knowing actually what's going to come up. And again, that it shouldn't be a fear, and a lot of people can take it as a fear. Oh my God, am I going to do meditation? And then the same process writing, I don't know what's coming up. But actually, that isn't a wrong and neither is it a right, but just allowing yourself to go deep down and just allowing for anything to come up and releasing it and knowing that actually I've dealt with it. And hopefully, if I do get a trigger moment, I know how I can deal with it a lot better. So that's the beauty of one, writing or even meditation as well, is to deal with it and just to release and let go and not holding on to it.
Yeah, writing definitely is one of the best things. It doesn't matter what you are facing because it can be any number of circumstances. But if you, I mean, like for me as a parent when my child was going through a lot of mental health issues, like when I was getting coaching and counseling on stuff I was going through. You'll often hear people talk about writing, and it's because of what we're saying right now. Like Mandeep is explaining, I'm explaining, is that when you get into like writing, there's a certain amount of letting go that just naturally happens. It flows
Absolutely.
out of you. It's not necessarily the same, I have found, at least with a lot of people, with typing, because I know we're in an industry now where you just get in your laptop and you can be in your bed and you can be typing. It seems to be, for many of my clients, and many for the people that I personally know, that typing doesn't create the same effects as actually like pen to paper writing it down, which is super, super interesting. And it doesn't mean that if you are somebody who can type out your stuff versus writing, that it's not going to be applicable to you. It's just we're all unique and we all have different things that speak to us.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So writing is a beautiful technique, but again, if you can do it in any moment of the day, whether that's even journaling, and that comes with dreams as well. If you can journal your dreams and then look back at it and look at the patterns, well, actually, what are my dreams telling me? Take note of that. I believe that, our spirit guides or our spirits, people that passed over, they come to us in our dreams, they deliver messages. I've had various messages from my grandmother or my father through dreams. So do pay attention to them. And if you can and want to, do journal them.
mhm. Yeah, and I've mentioned on this show before, and I actually have a journal for people for this kind of stuff to help them with their spiritual path. So I love that you're bringing this up. And I know many people don't always remember their dreams. And this is another reason why it's like super helpful to get into the practice of journaling before you go to bed, because you're offloading what is going on in the analytical mind, which is that gateway or that door to get into your subconscious and what's really going on with you underneath, not the surface level stuff, but the deep stuff. And
Yeah.
so, if anyone is struggling to remember dreams, that is one of the ways that you can do it. But let's talk about Mandeep, because she is a psychic and she's somebody who does readings for people. So, and you've mentioned dreams, and I believe in dreams. Dreams are super powerful. I get a lot of messages from dreams as well. So, what is it like for you for when you are working with somebody? I mean, do you get hits in the moment? Do you get hits before somebody comes to you? Like, how does it work for
So
you?
when I have a client booked in, I will sit down at least 10-15 minutes before I tap into the reading with their energy. So I'm feeling into their energy, whatever's coming up, whatever the spirit guides want to deliver. So when I'm straight into that reading, I've got a load of information that I've already got to give them. And that gives validation right at the beginning of the reading. And the connection's already there. And then that just kind of flows from there. When I do my readings, I don't use any tools. I don't use any oracle cards, pendulums, or anything like that. I just tune in completely using spirit guides, the vibration and frequency. So all the information comes through in that sense. And then I'm able to pick up people's emotions, things that are quite traumatic, pain in different parts of my body, whether somebody's gone through an illness, even a car crash, or anything at all. And that can be having what I have, it can be a blessing or it can be um, not a blessing. So it kind of falls in two ways there. So it can be good, but then in other ways for me, it can be quite traumatic as well. So having those boundaries, knowing that actually I shouldn't step over and keeping it within certain boundaries as well. But yeah, readings are very, very deep, connecting to the spirit world, allowing the spirit to come through, and then just delivering on completely free flow.
I love it. Yeah. It's really interesting what happens when you do quiet yourself and allow messages to come in. It's a very unique experience. So for you, are you the type of person who gets your visuals? Do you get your pictures? Do you hear it? Do you feel it?
It's everything,
Everything?
feelings. Yeah,
Okay.
it's everything. As I'm saying, it's very deep for me. When I first started doing this, although I'm naturally gifted in it, it's something that runs in my family. But once I first tapped into it in my early 30s, when I first started understanding it, I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. So I was doing something like 6 to 8 readings a day, but then I couldn't get up for 2 days. So it was then important
Mm-hmm.
for me to realize, well, actually, I need to have, again, talking about boundaries, I need to have my own boundaries around this. So now I will only take X amount of readings and I won't do more than that because I've got to look after myself. And that isn't just about me. Everybody needs to know their own boundaries, their own self-care, and actually value and appreciate yourself. It's really important.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, self-care is definitely how you create an act of love towards yourself. And when you can do that,
Exactly that.
yeah, when your soul is kind of at peace with how you are treating it, a lot of good things can happen. So,
Yes.
I really love that you have the multifacet, because, every medium has different gifts, and it's super exciting to be able to work with somebody who has all three facets to it. And what's really also, when you were talking about boundaries, one of the things that it brought up for me is I will for with my tarot cards, when I would do the channeling messages, I would limit them to 2 because I would be so drained from it.
Mm.
But I think that, one of the things that mine is so not what you commercially see. So, like, when I'm getting messages, I'm taking messages for like 30 to 45 minutes. I'm like, I'm getting into their bubble, so to speak, is what
Yeah.
I consider it. And yeah, so I totally understand that it is draining. And for those of you who don't know, like, everything is energy. And so you are responsible for managing your energy. And
Absolutely.
I love that Mandeep is not only explaining that she does that for herself, but letting you know that that's something that everyone can practice.
Absolutely. And it's vital for anybody across, because we can all be going through lots of different things, whether that's bad relationships, having a tough family, dealing with your past stuff. We all have trigger moments, but knowing your own self-worth and having those boundaries, putting those value on your side, on yourself, then you realize that actually I'm just as important as the other person or my partner or my children. Because if you're not looking after you, how can you look after somebody else? So it's really important to value and respect yourself and your energy. And that's not just in ethics or with you working with somebody else. You just need to know your own value.
Absolutely. Yes. I do remember a pivotal moment in my life before I really started doing inner work where um I realized what you were just saying, that I realized that I was putting certain people, not everybody, but I was putting certain people's opinions like over my own. And obviously I go against that now. So, but it was a really eye-opening moment out there. And, I always encourage everybody at any point in time, you can make a decision to do something different. And that includes valuing your own opinion over somebody else's, because
Yeah,
honestly, you're with your body and your thoughts 24/7. They never leave you.
exactly that. And if
So,
you walk into a room and you can sense the energy in there, again, you could be picking up that energy,
mhm,
which can, if you leave yourself very open, this is where you've got to know how to ground and protect your energy and not be open to anything and everything. Because then again, that can create its own issues, whether that's psychic attacks or anything else that can kind of come in. Just be mindful that you do ground and protect your energies very strong.
yeah, and that's also another life lesson that I had, because as an empath, I was just openly walking around feeling everybody's emotions and thinking, I like being alone much better. And I know a lot of other empaths out there feel that way, and so grounding is um, super important. And I'm just curious, are you, when you teach your classes, is like, if somebody wanted to sign up for one of your classes, is this the kind of stuff that you would go over? How you ground? How do you
Uh, it,
protect your
I'm just
energy?
writing, I'm actually in the middle of writing a course, and it starts off with grounding, protecting your energy. So before you start doing anything, that is the first point to call, is to ground and protect your energies. That's, on a spirit level, that's on an earthly level. It's vital you ground and protect.
Mhm. Just as it's vital to have boundaries. Those two things go hand in
Yes,
hand. Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. Well, let me ask you, because this is like, in the world that I live in, you have when you have a business, it's always about, well, who do you work with? So, and as somebody who's, you know, similar but different, right? I don't necessarily say, well, I'm only going to see people who take like, I'm only working with divorce clients. I'm only working with parents with autism. Like I don't niche into those categories. And
Yeah.
just across the board, many mediums are the same way. They take who comes because it's who's called to you.
Yes.
But do you find that there's any patterns? Do you attract certain repeat type of
Definitely. I have noticed if I'm going through something, for example, when I was going through my own divorce, I was attracting predominantly women, because that's who I predominantly seem to be attracting is women, but I do have male clients that come to me as well. That then have been or are going through divorce, or going through relationships where they're feeling overpowered by the male energy, perhaps, or perhaps they're in a better job, or there's a bit of jealousy, confliction there. So I have gone, have done readings where actually when I'm going through something, that the client's either going through it and I've gone through it. So coming out on the other side of that, I'm able to then kind of be in their shoes, understand from an empathic level, but also know what they're going through, and then deliver messages in that way. Again, having those boundaries as well.
Yeah, because you don't want to like as well, I don't know. I'm going to just speak from this from my own experience, but
Yeah,
when you have just gone through something and you're helping somebody that you may be 3 steps ahead of them,
yeah,
it can be easy to get sucked back into that energy. So at least for me, I'm only speaking for me.
yeah,
But at the same time, I also believe in my heart, I believe that when you are 2 to 3 steps ahead of somebody, you are like the ideal person to help that person through that situation because it's so fresh for you, which is also the
yeah,
hindsight of you can get sucked in. But
yeah.
yeah, again,
But it's very much like the title of the book, of my book is Light on the Other Side. You then know that there is light on the other side,
mhm.
and you can allow for that person to feel empowered. Or actually, I mean, I don't do that in my readings and I won't talk about myself because I think that's not professionalism. But in your own being, you know that actually there is light on the other side. You know that that client or that person can shift, they can go through it, they can transform. So in your own way, or in my own way, I can explain that, but I won't delve into my own personal stuff because I don't think that's professional.
Yeah, I mean, they're there for you. It's the same way when I
Yeah,
coach. I mean, unless my story is going to help them make a pivotal shift, it doesn't play a
yeah,
part. So yeah, I get what you're saying. And the time goes by so fast for anybody who has ever worked with a medium. That time goes by
it
so fast.
does.
Yeah.
If it's flowing, because some people can actually come with to you expecting you to pick up everything and know everything about them, but it
Yeah.
doesn't work like that. So actually, when people are like that and they are very skeptical, and there's so many out there, if you come with a very closed energy, it just makes it more difficult for the person reading to kind of tap into that energy because you've already closed your energy down. So in all honesty, it's better to come with an open mind, an open energy field, and it's so much more easier to read. It doesn't mean that you come in and you shoot your mouth off and say this, that, and the other. It just means that actually I'm open to hear anything, and I'm not here to test you because it shouldn't be that way. It should be free flowing, and just like you said, that's where the time just goes so fast. And those are the best readings, in all honesty, because you know that person's come for genuine help. They've come from their heart and they do want to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, so I'm curious now. I haven't had the privilege of reading your book, The Light on the Other Side, but when you wrote this book, did you pull in stories from working with your clients? Like, and I mean this like with you changing names and protecting that person's identity, or was it solely based on like your personal experiences versus like adding your work experiences in there?
It's mostly around my own experiences, my own spiritual experiences when I was young, seeing or hearing that my grandmother was going to pass, then knowing when my father was going to pass, and just having some really prolific experiences and having psychic attacks. Um, but I didn't delve into the clients. I think that might be left for another book. But for this, it felt like I needed to do the groundwork for this one to get my story out and not necessarily delve into the readings that I've done. So it touched a little bit on there, but it's mostly about the experiences I've gone through and then anybody that's perhaps listening to this, knowing that if you are different, if you are very introverted, and if you have connection with spirit and anyway, that there's nothing wrong with you. And if you are just a very quiet person, but you have this a very erratic imagination, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. And there are people out there that probably do understand you.
Yeah, actually, that's something I want to touch upon because for me and what I see with people that I work with, many of them had gifts as a child, but as they got older, those gifts they were either outcast or shun, like they had a lot of shame around it. People didn't accept them. And they closed the door on this. And a lot of the people that I'm working with now, as far as my coaching, are people trying to get back into contact with who their natural abilities were as a child. But it sounds like for you that you didn't go through that. Like you kept it going throughout your childhood and through adulthood.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't realize until it was, I think, my early 30s, that I was, or I had something, psychic medium abilities, whatever you want to call it. Before that, it was always just the sense of knowing, and it was just part of life for me. I didn't know it
Mhm.
anything different. And I didn't realize until that point in my 30s that there is so, or that it runs in my family. So it wasn't until I opened up about it, and I remember writing a post on Facebook, and it felt very much like, um, as I was admitting to being lesbian or something like that. It was that kind of feeling, perhaps,
Mhm.
that, you know, I'm putting out something that I'm disclosing about myself, because I was a very private person, very introverted. And that, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm putting out that I'm a psychic medium. And what the hell does that mean? But I actually was very surprised the amount of positive response I got, and even family members asking me for reading. So it was very flattering in its own way. But I thankfully I didn't receive negativity around that at that time until many years later, after I went through my divorce. That a member of my family did say, well, who do you think you are? Do you think you're God, that you can read for people? And for me, and I was like, it's never crossed my mind in that sense. I'm very spiritual and I believe in certain things about my religion, but I've never thought myself as God, that I read for you and I think I'm this almighty. It comes from a place of pure, and I'm giving it to you
Mhm.
in messages as a pure. So I've never thought in that way. So that's the only negative that perhaps I got from my family. But apart from that, everyone was very accepting.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you got to have this gift from childhood and keep it with you, which only made it grow. And now, because it's so secure for you, it's so anchored in who you are, it's one of the reasons why you can do so much to help people. And I
Yeah.
love that.
It's
So,
really important to reciprocate your energy. As much as you receive is as much as you've got to give back. It is, life isn't all about take, take, take. You've got to be able to give back. And for me, I think in any way you can give back. For me, I like to do my events and then be able to raise money for charity, that especially for special needs, my son's special needs school, or for any charities that have been involved with us. That's my way of giving back.
so what do
But
you do for
charities
these?
anyway.
Yeah, what do
Sorry,
you
go
do
on.
for these events?
So for my next one, it's in September. It's quite a big one. I've got a huge singer lined up from the Asian field, and again, it's me coming out of my comfort zones, doing this all on my own. I haven't even got any support. I've got a comedian. I'm doing a tribal dance with a lady. I'm actually learning how to do tribal dance. I'm actually doing a routine with her at the event. There's a rock band. So there's absolutely loads happening. There's a well-being side that's got lots of stands and stalls, and then I'm starting it off with a beautiful meditation, and then just allowing for that energy to kind of flow through. So there's a rapper as well. There's a singer. So there's so much stuff happening, and it's almost like as soon as I put it out there, it's everything's just aligned. And the title of the event is called Spiritism. So tism taken from autism meets Bungratism, because Bhangra's taken from a cultural aspect from my background. I've grown up with Bhangra on a music level. My grandfather was huge in the Bhangra industry, sorry, in the spiritual industry than my uncles. So it kind of like I wanted to bring them together. So
Is
yeah,
is there another
that's where the
name for that? For my audience, Mandeep is from United Kingdom, so I don't recognize the word that you're saying, and I'm sure there's something that is similar here in the US, but I'm like, "What do you
yeah.
mean?"
So Bhangra is it's a fusion dance. It's a folk dance taken from the Sikh Punjabi community. It goes back to India and Punjab. So it's a beautiful, very energetic dance. Um, and that's why I've kind of included it into the event. So please do Google it or YouTube it. It's very communal.
Yeah, I think that would be exciting. I always love seeing different things. I was really fortunate when I went to college. I went to an all women's college, and it was all about women in theater, like such
Oh,
old fashioned stuff, like theater, like acting, all of these things. And so they would often host these African dances, and there were actually
wow.
a lot of people in my college from Africa, and we actually had an African princess that I graduated
Oh,
with.
wow.
So freaking
That's
cool.
amazing.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I loved watching just everybody's culture is so
So that's
fascinating.
because you've got a very open mind. And as I mentioned earlier, if you've got a closed mind, then you're closing off automatically everything around you. But if you've got that open mind, you're almost like a sponge. You
Yeah.
want to take things in and then you evolve. The more you take in, the more you're evolving. The more you're learning, again, the more you're evolving.
Yeah, and just as a little note to the audience, because Mandeep is laying it on here for you guys.
Oh,
She said several like really great takeaways and things that will tie into things that I've talked about in the podcast in previous episodes. But like for instance, Mandeep talked about you can't just take. It's a give and exchange. I mean, this goes into like the Aini and being able to reciprocate because what you do for others, you do for yourself, right? And this is what Mandeep is like
exactly that.
personally showing an experience and what she is actively doing. And it's, as she's mentioned, it is her own time, her own energy, her own dollar, and the stress of figuring out all of how
Yes,
everything connects, you know? So,
absolutely.
and the thing
It's
about this is I know when this is done, something even better is going to open up for her because that's the way it works. And I just love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think on that level. And as I mentioned, if your mind is open in that way, you will attract. And that's what it's about, just attracting whatever you're thinking. And before we came on, just talking about, not putting that pressure on yourself, constantly thinking, I've got to think positive, positive, positive. Actually, what you're doing is you're putting pressure on yourself. So it isn't about trying to think positive all the time, because it's actually where in that negativity is where you actually learn. That's where you actually grow. If you don't go through that trauma, if you don't go through something difficult, how are you going to pick yourself up? How are you going to grow? And how are you then going to evolve? The happy times are there for you to enjoy in that moment, but the sad and the bad times is actually where, that's where you learn the most. That's where actually you evolve and learn. And that's where you then pass on your blessings to other people.
Exactly. And again, this is why I love this podcast, Practicing Life, because it is something, one, we can't get things right. We have to go through the mud and go
Yes.
through the picking yourself off of the ground and doing something differently because that's we learned through unfortunately we learn through pain. So
Yep.
not always, we don't have to make everything painful, but we really
No.
learn very quickly through pain. I'll tell you that.
Yep.
There was something that you said that reminded me of something, but it's gone. So we'll move forward.
Okay.
Um, so with you doing your psychic work, how much time did you have available to write this book? Because I imagine this was probably your psychic stuff is you're probably booked as much as you've set your boundary too. So like
Yes.
how was it writing this book? How did you find the time for it?
It took me, I think, 6 months to write it. So yeah, it was dedicating a time slot every single day to this is a time I'm going to sit down, and this is how much time I'm going to allocate. And if I can't write more, that's fine. It's to take a step back, as I said, pause and take a break, but try not to exceed that time. And again, that's how you then value and appreciate yourself and, making that time. So,
Yeah. And so a different way of saying that is Mandeep had the commitment to herself and the
yeah,
self-integrity. And that self-integrity, again, is one of the foundations to self-love, self-worth. So I love that because, it's not always convenient to keep that time slot.
no, thankfully, I had an amazing mentor. So she kind of kept me in check as well. And that kind of really helped at the beginning. So without her starting that process, yeah, it did really help. So having that structure at the beginning, as I said, if you don't have to follow it completely, there's got to be contingency there somewhere,
Yeah,
and
the
just be kind to
compassion.
yourself.
Hmm.
Exactly. As I mentioned, when you're writing something, you don't know what's going to come up, and if it's something so deep and traumatic, I shed loads of tears whilst I was writing this book. But I needed to because I thought I had dealt with it, but I hadn't. But this book helped me to do that. So again, taking that step back, I took a few days out and then went back to it. And when you do go back to something, you realize actually you've shifted something. The energy is different. Your energy, your mind state is very different, and you see it from a completely different light. So that's why it's important to take that break.
Hmm. Exactly. So what was your intention for writing this book? What did you want for the reader to experience or get out of it?
So initially, when I started writing, it was a very different book. It was on a business level. But when I started writing, as I mentioned, my story just wanted to come out. So for me, the intention was one, the title of the book, Light on the Side, is for you to connect that there is spirit world out there. And then also the other meaning is that, the traumatic side, something, whatever we go through traumatic, that there is light on the side. You're not forever going to be stuck in that moment. It could be a moment in a day, it could be a moment in a week or a year, whatever it is, you will come out on the other side. So for me, it's to show that actually I've gone through different, difficult situations, but I've managed to somehow get to the other side. And through that, whatever journey it was, I met people on the way. I connected with spirit in certain ways. I learned so much along that journey, whether spiritually, whether, through people. There's so much to learn, and then to evolve from it. And that's
Mhm.
what I wanted people to see or feel through the book, that and perhaps some things that I've gone through for them to be able to relate to it. And again, you'll read through the book and realize that actually she got through it. Maybe I can get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just it. We all come here in these bodies to experience certain things.
Yeah,
And to help another person through that, I think is a really great blessing for both parties. So just a personal opinion.
it is. I think anything that you write personal, it's a very brave step to take. Um, for me, it was a very difficult one, especially talking about personal stuff. It might be involving families or friends or whatever, being ostracized from my family for being a certain way, doing certain things. It's definitely a brave step, and you've got to be very rooted in your beliefs and who you are, what you're doing, and for the higher good. And I had to
Mhm.
keep telling myself throughout writing that I'm doing it to help somebody. Somebody's going to pick this up and read this, and I want to be able to help them. Again, for them to know that there is light on the other side. So I had to block out everything and everyone's thoughts that, oh, if they read this or if they get an inkling of this, what are they going to think, my family in particular. But I had to block all of that because I knew that whatever I'm writing, it's going to help somebody.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. And it is important to distinguish that the thoughts coming in and uh, what you want to accomplish, because those can
Yeah.
be two different things. The outside forces versus the intrinsic forces can be different.
Yes.
So
And it
there's
all comes down to, if you read the book, a lot of it is talking about control, as you mentioned, about forces and etc. a lot of what we go through in life, relationships, it could be on a political level, it could be any kind of level. A lot of it all boils down to control. And a lot of this book, you will realize that I was leading a very controlled life. And
Mhm.
again, reaching out to those people, if you are going through controlling relationships, and that doesn't mean with a partner, that could be your parents, that could be at work, that could be at whatever establishment, and you can again get on the other side of that. I had a lot of bullying at work, so I do touch on that as well. And I was told by my manager that bullying is nothing, but actually being a grown adult and being bullied, it's a big thing. It's not nothing small.
Yeah, it is really interesting because for many people, they associate bullying with just elementary, middle school, high school, like some type of
Isn't
it isn't. It
no,
totally happens in our adult
yeah,
world. It can happen
yes,
when you just go in to pay for gas, like in a brief
yes,
interchange. Like it is really interesting and it's so I believe that if you were reading this book, you would probably be able to have takeaways over like how to's potentially.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then
I'm hoping for anybody that does read it leaves with a very empowering mindset, but also you have to be prepared that you will then think, that I could transform my life, so that you would make those rapid changes within your own life, knowing that somebody else out there, could potentially or has potentially done it.
mhm. Yeah, I mean I see how much people give away their authority and I just anybody, Mandeep, anybody like you, anybody like me that are helping people to claim their own authority, definitely going to be a fan of. So please go out and buy Light on the Other Side. I will put it in the show notes. Allow this information because it's about allowing. It's not about forcing or putting pressure on yourself. It is about allowing things to kind of sink in at your time, whenever that is, because the way the brain works is we filter out things that we're not ready to perceive or receive. And so, and that's one of the things that Mandeepa was basically explaining in a different way is that, when she was writing this book, she was having emotional times. But then when she allowed the emotions to come and process them and to feel them and to transform them, she could come back with a different perspective because she allowed something to pass and shift within her. So
Absolutely.
just know wherever you are, that this book, whether it's, 1 month from now or 6 years from now, it it will help you with wherever you are at because we filter out information until we're ready to receive it. So,
100%.
and then what would you like to talk about as far as like how people can get in contact with you, how they can reach out to you, work with you as a psychic, or potentially take one of your upcoming courses?
So I've got a website. It's called www dot, that was that three W's I said, yeah, www.uniquepsychic.com, or I'm there on Facebook, Mandeep Kaur, Psychic Medium Healer. I'm on Instagram, Mandeep Kaur.3705. So those are the various ways you can connect with me.
Wonderful. I really appreciate you coming onto the show and talking about your experience, talking about your
Thank you for
book.
having me.
You are so welcome. For all of you that are listening, please check out the show notes. And just to tell you, you matter.